The CEO's long-lost first love had returned from abroad. Finally facing the harsh reality, I left Henry Fu a divorce agreement and a miscarriage report. My no-nonsense Northeastern mom hopped on an overnight train to Beijing and took my hand. "Let's go, kiddo. Mom's taking you home." Tears were just about to spill down my cheeks. But Mom grabbed my luggage and marched straight for the high-speed rail station. "Count to 3 and suck those tears back in." I slipped off my wedding ring, grabbed my suitcase and walked out of the luxury villa I'd called home for years. Mom urged me on, not slowing down for a second. "Quit dawdling. If we don't hurry, we'll miss the train. How'd you expect to get home before dark?" I mumbled under my breath, "It's already October. Even if we arrive at 6, it'll be pitch black outside." Mom shot me a glare so sharp it could cut glass, and I instantly clamped my mouth shut. "Hurry up and you'll make it home in time." I'd been scared of Mom ever since I was a kid. She had a temper like a lit fuse, and one wrong move meant a painful pinch on the back of my thigh. Mom charged ahead like a woman on a mission, hauling all my bags and barging into the high-speed rail station. The moment the train pulled out of the station, I knew loud and clear that Henry Fu and I were truly over. I was no longer the wife of the powerful CEO Henry Fu. "Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking, "I've lived in Beijing for so many years. Why do I feel like I have nothing to show for it?" Mom gave my arm a sharp pinch. "My girl graduated from a top university, worked at a fancy firm, became a kick-ass lawyer, and even married some big-shot CEO. That's more than enough. You've done good. Just had a bit of bad luck, that's all." I hadn't slept properly in weeks. The constant fighting with Henry, the heartbreak, the exhaustion, it had all worn me down to the bone. But to Mom it was just a bit of bad luck. I wanted to argue, to tell her how twisted and painful this whole mess with Henry had been, how suffocating it felt to be a trophy wife in a gilded cage. But Mom wasn't having any of it. She clamped a hand over my mouth, putting an end to the conversation once and for all. "You're tired, that's all. Go home, rest up, and everything will be right as rain again." I'd felt a twinge of sadness at the thought of leaving Beijing after 7 years, but Mom's no-nonsense attitude had chased most of it away. As the train rumbled along, it hit me that I hadn't been on a high-speed rail in ages. Henry Fu was the kind of man who'd pay top dollar for peace and quiet. He hated crowds, hated noise, he wanted the finest, most exclusive experience wherever he went. If private jet permits in China weren't such a hassle to get, he'd have bought one ages ago. Whenever I was with him in those quiet, sterile environments, my mind was always racing a mile a minute. What should I say to this tycoon? How should I behave at that meeting? I'd always been a stickler for perfection, always worried about measuring up. Henry had pulled me into a world that was never meant for someone like me, and I'd had to claw and fight just to keep up. The pressure had been unbearable. This was my first time back on a high-speed rail in years. Mom had insisted we book the ticket so we could get home as fast as possible. The young girl sitting next to me was scrolling through her tablet when she suddenly glanced up. "Excuse me, are you Henry Fu's wife?" She was a total gossip junkie, and she'd even dug up the blurry, rarely seen photo of Mrs. Fu that had been floating around in all those Henry Fu dying love and reunited news stories. I gave her a small smile. "Mrs. Fu is probably at Henry's villa right now." Legally, Henry and I were still married. We were in the middle of our divorce cooling-off period. But it wouldn't be long before the title of Mrs. Fu belonged to Eleanor Gu. The girl's face turned pink with embarrassment. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I just thought you were really pretty and elegant. That photo of Mrs. Fu was super hard to find, it was all blurry, so I must have mixed you up." Mom, who'd been listening in, suddenly boomed, "This is my daughter, home where she belongs. She has nothing to do with some Mrs. Fu nonsense." The girl apologized profusely and went back to scrolling through her gossip feeds. Photos of Eleanor Gu were plastered all over the internet, everywhere you looked. Meanwhile, I was the so-called Mrs. Fu, with only one blurry photo to my name. Ever since Eleanor Gu had returned to China and Henry had gone to the airport to pick her up, the tabloids had been having a field day. Eleanor Gu, the wealthy and glamorous heiress of the Gu Group, was a social media star with millions of adoring fans. "Make way for the queen," her posts would declare. She and Henry had been the golden couple back in their university days, the stuff of legends, the perfect match. But then disaster had struck the Fu Group. Henry's father had passed away suddenly, triggering a brutal power struggle. Henry's rightful inheritance was on the verge of being stolen out from under him. At the very moment Henry needed her most, Eleanor Gu, who was supposed to marry him, had chosen to leave the country. Plunged into the depths of despair, the once untouchable golden boy had hit rock bottom. He'd faced rejection after rejection, and at one point he'd even ended up hospitalized from stress and exhaustion. The law firm I worked for had already decided to side with Henry's conniving uncle. But I'd ignored their orders, bought a fruit basket and gone to visit Henry in the hospital. He'd been lying in bed, his face gaunt and hollow, a shadow of his former self. He'd stared at me silently for a long time before speaking, his voice cold and defeated. "Miss Ruan, I'm a broken man now. Your firm won't get any cooperation deals from the Fu Group by wasting your time on me." He was injured, isolated, with barely anyone left in the company who still supported him. From a purely rational standpoint, I shouldn't have been there that day. I frowned, leaning forward and looking him straight in the eye. "Henry Fu, you need to get back on your feet. The board needs a leader who's ruthless and decisive, not a man wallowing in self-pity. You have to trust me. We will get the Fu Group back. And when we do, will you consider partnering with our firm?" Henry's voice trembled as he asked, "Why? Why are you choosing me?" He'd reached out to countless old-timers in the company, begging for their support, but every single one of them had turned him down. Yet here I was, offering him my help without any strings attached. I tilted my head, studying his face, and said, "I'm not helping you for free. You have to marry me. And when this is all over, I get my fair share of the profits. I'm good at what I do, law, finance, you name it. Our firm has deep ties with the rich and powerful. You choose me and you won't regret it. I'm willing to bet on you." The fire of ambition in my eyes had reignited the cold, dead embers of his heart. But I'd had my own selfish motives too. I'd liked Henry Fu. Liked his sharp, handsome features. Liked the way he commanded a room when he was at the top of his game. Even when he'd hit rock bottom, I couldn't bear to watch him destroy himself. I'd wanted to take a chance on him. Even if I didn't end up with his love, I'd at least walk away with something to show for it. I'd winked at him, emphasizing my point. "You won't regret this." Against all odds, he'd reached out and taken my hand. I'd stood by his side through every step of the battle for the inheritance. I'd helped him cultivate loyal allies, outmaneuver his enemies, and win over the toughest business partners. Every single day had been a fight, exhausting me more than working 3 jobs combined. But Henry had risen to the occasion. He'd always been a natural-born businessman, he just needed a push to get back on his feet after the devastating blow. Before long, he'd become the CEO everyone had feared and respected. And once he'd secured his position, the Fu Group's market value had skyrocketed, surpassing even its former glory. Henry had been grateful, that much was true. He'd organized a spectacular fireworks show for me, pulling me into his arms and whispering a promise against my shoulder. "Piper Ruan, you never gave up on me when I was at my lowest. We'll share the view from the top together. We'll be together forever." His lips had brushed against the crook of my neck, and in that moment, I'd truly believed that I'd finally found love. We'd even talked about having kids. But between our busy schedules, it had never happened until now. Years had passed, and just like that, Eleanor Gu was back in town. I'd just found out I was pregnant, bursting with joy and eager to share the news with Henry. But when I'd walked through the front door of our villa, I'd heard him talking to his best friend on the phone. I've never been able to forget her all these years. His friend had teased him, "What about your wife, huh? Bigamy's kind of frowned upon these days, you know. Piper Ruan will always be Mrs. Fu. That's a promise I made to her." His words had shattered me, sending me plummeting into a cold, dark abyss. The illusion of love I'd clung to for so long had been nothing more than a lie. I'd loved him with all my heart, but it had always been one-sided. I'd lost completely and utterly. And then the tabloids had exploded with news of Henry and Eleanor. Photos of Eleanor in her little black dress, looking as elegant and proud as ever, with Henry waiting for her at the airport. The Fu Group was now worth far more than it had been in its heyday. Of course Eleanor would be nice to him now. The airport had even been decorated with flowers for her homecoming, but she'd outshone every single bloom there. It was as if I'd never existed at all. They dominated the headlines, their love story splashed across every gossip site. Meanwhile, Henry and I had never even had a real wedding. The difference between being loved and being tolerated was so obvious it hurt. I'd stood by Henry through thick and thin, helped him climb his way back to the top, but I'd never once been able to reach his heart. Eleanor's return had rubbed that painful truth in my face every single day. Whenever Eleanor needed him, Henry would drop everything and run to her side. I'd started having nightmares, losing sleep, losing my hair from stress. But the final straw had been the night I'd felt sick and needed to go to the hospital. Henry was supposed to take me, but instead he'd rushed off to comfort Eleanor, who'd been drowning her sorrows in a bar. That night Henry hadn't come home at all. I'd gone to the hospital alone. And because of the stress and heartbreak, I'd lost our baby. Mom noticed I'd been staring at my phone nonstop and swatted it out of my hand, covering the screen with her palm. "Quit looking at that thing. You'll ruin your eyes." I put my phone down, my stomach growling loudly. Before I could stop myself, I blurted out, "Mom, I'm craving pickled cabbage." I meant it too. I hadn't had pickled cabbage in years. Henry had always preferred Western food, and Northeastern dishes like pickled cabbage had never once graced his fancy dinner table. But Mom shot me down without a second thought. "Pickled cabbage? In October? It's not even been fermented yet. Where'd you expect me to get pickled cabbage this time of year?" Piper Juan, did marriage turn your brain to mush? Or was it the pregnancy? I never had all these silly cravings when I was carrying you. Maybe marriage had turned me into a fool. I'd given up my career for Henry, fought by his side for years, only to end up running away from Beijing with my tail between my legs. This wasn't just bad luck, like Mom had said. This was being the biggest fool of all. When you divorce that bastard, you make sure you get every penny you deserve. Mom ranted, not letting up. I raised you better than to let some man walk all over you. We don't take advantage of people, but we sure as hell don't let people take advantage of us either. Crying over that good for nothing? Not worth a single tear. Mom kept nagging away, her voice mixing with the rumble of the train and the chatter of the other passengers. And in that noisy, chaotic environment, I fell asleep. For the first time since I'd found out Eleanor Gu was coming home, I slept like a baby. It had been ages since I'd last been home. Mom had never approved of my marriage to Henry Fu. She'd refused to move to Beijing with me, and between my busy schedule, I'd never found the time to come back and visit her either. The moment we stepped through the door, Mom fussed over me like a hen with her chick. "Look at you, wasting away to nothing." She shook her head disapprovingly, then marched into the kitchen with her apron slung over her arm. By the time she emerged, the dining table was groaning under a mountain of hearty Northeastern dishes. No fancy, low-calorie health food here. There was a huge platter of crispy sweet and sour pork, steamed buns stuffed with ribs and long beans that she'd made from scratch, and the only vegetable on the table was a heaping bowl of stir-fried potatoes. "Eat up. Eat more." Mom piled my bowl high with food until it looked like a tiny mountain. I was already stuffed to the brim. "Mom, that's enough. I really can't eat anymore." But Mom wasn't having any of it, her chopsticks still hovering over the dishes. "Enough. Look at you, you're as skinny as a rail. You need to fatten up." "What, you don't like my cooking now?" After years of dining with people who barely picked at their food to maintain their figures, I was completely overwhelmed by Mom's warm, unbridled hospitality. "Come on, finish it off. A full stomach can get you through anything." Resigned, I took another big bite. After dinner, I helped Mom clean up the kitchen, then we curled up on the couch and chatted about nothing in particular. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt completely at peace. All the chaos and heartbreak of being a wealthy man's wife felt like a lifetime ago, something that had happened to someone else entirely. That night, I had the strangest dream. I dreamt that Mom kept piling food onto my plate until I was so full I turned into a giant balloon floating higher and higher off the ground, drifting further away from Earth. Henry was yelling up at me from below, his voice frantic. Piper Juan, come back here." I giggled and floated even further away from him. But then out of nowhere Mom appeared holding a string attached to my balloon. With barely any effort at all, she tugged me right back down to earth. "You silly girl. Where do you think you're going?" Fine, I'll make you pickled cabbage, okay? Mom will figure it out." When Henry Fu returned to the villa, Piper Juan was already gone. The huge, opulent house felt eerily empty without her. He just helped Eleanor Gu settle into her new place in Beijing. She'd been wearing a skimpy nightgown, begging him to stay the night. But he'd thought of Piper waiting for him at home and turned Eleanor down. Now a sudden thought hit him like a ton of bricks. Why had Piper wanted to see him the other day? She'd mentioned feeling unwell and needing to go to the hospital. A sharp, throbbing pain pulsed at Henry's temples, his heart skipping a beat with a sense of dread he couldn't explain. "Where's Mrs. Fu?" The butler looked taken aback. "Madam has already left, so she left 2 documents for you." Henry's hands trembled as he opened the files. The first was a divorce agreement. Piper, with her dual degrees in finance and law, had drafted it meticulously, every clause fair and reasonable. She only wanted what was legally hers, her rightful share of the assets they'd accumulated during their marriage. But she actually wants a divorce? Henry didn't even realize he'd spoken the words through gritted teeth, his voice laced with a fury he didn't understand. He ripped open the second document, his blood running cold when he saw the words scrawled across the top. Miscarriage surgery report. The date on it was from yesterday, the very day she'd gone to the hospital. The room spun violently around him. When had she been pregnant? Oh right. He'd mentioned wanting a baby a while back, so they'd stopped using protection. But when nothing had happened, he'd assumed they'd never be able to have children together. Had she gone to the hospital that day to terminate the pregnancy? Or had she lost the baby the moment she'd found out she was expecting? Henry didn't dare to think about it. A wave of dizziness washed over him, his knees buckling slightly. When did she leave? Where did she go? I need to find her now. The butler hesitated, his voice hesitant. "I'm not entirely sure, sir. I think Madam was planning to go back to her hometown." Henry only knew that Piper's hometown was somewhere in the northeast. But he had no idea where exactly. He'd never once accompanied her back home to meet her family. "Where is her hometown?" The butler stammered, admitting he had no clue either. "Find out. Hurry. Book me the next available flight the moment you have the address." I was scrolling through my phone one afternoon when Mom, ever the observant one, plopped down next to me. Annoyed. Her eyes zeroed in on the screen in an instant, her brows furrowing into a deep frown. What kind of shameless hussy is this? Good grief, what is she playing at? On the screen was a message Eleanor Gu had sent me along with a photo. In the picture, Henry was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of his villa. His reflection was visible in the glass, and right behind him Eleanor was draped in nothing but a bath towel, her figure deliberately flaunted, half-naked and provocative. It was a blatant, shameless taunt. I was already in the middle of getting a divorce and she still had the nerve to rub this in my face. Rage bubbled up inside me, a wave of nausea churning in my stomach. I dragged Henry's contact out of my blocked list, sent him a screenshot of Eleanor's message and photo, then promptly blocked him again. Next, I forwarded the photo to a friend who worked at a tabloid, typing out a message with icy resolve. "Publish this. Henry and I are still legally married. Let's stir up some rumors about his extramarital affair. It would serve him right. Besides, with the Fu Group now a leading conglomerate, a little scandal like this wouldn't do much damage to its stock price, and thus wouldn't affect the value of my assets." But it still made my skin crawl. I bit down hard on my lower lip in frustration, a nervous habit I'd picked up over the years. Mom noticed immediately. I shrugged, my voice calm and detached. "It takes 2 to tango." Mom nodded in agreement, her tone sharp. If he'd kept his door locked tight, she could have stripped naked and it wouldn't have mattered. He's the one who let her in, no backbone at all. Her words were crude, but they hit the nail on the head. I couldn't help but twitch the corner of my mouth in a half-smile. "Kiddo, we've tried the CO type, time to switch things up." Mom suddenly perked up, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "You know the boy next door? The one who's 6'3"? He's built like a brick house, hardworking, and knows how to treat a woman right. Now that's a man with some real stamina." I was mid-sip of water when she said that, and I nearly choked to death. "Mom, I'm still technically married." "Details. I know all about your little divorce cooling-off period. Doesn't mean you can't look around for a better option now, does it? Oh, and what if that Henry guy comes crawling back here? I've been reading these romance novels lately, something about a CO chasing his ex-wife and begging for forgiveness." Mom grabbed her broom from the corner, brandishing it like a weapon. "If he dares to show his face around here, I'll chase him off with this. Make him regret ever crossing you." I shook my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. "He won't come." Henry was far too proud a man to beg anyone for anything. That was why Eleanor's hold over him was so fatal. She was the one that got away when he was young and vulnerable. Now that their roles were reversed, now that he was the powerful CEO and she was the one coming back to him, he was completely wrapped around her finger, reveling in the power dynamic. Ever since Eleanor had returned to Beijing, Henry had been dropping everything to rush to her side at the slightest excuse. Eleanor had made it her mission to prove to me, without a shadow of a doubt, that Henry's heart would always tip in her favor. Mom and I settled into a quiet, peaceful routine in our little northeastern town. Even though I'd blocked Henry's number, his butler kept calling me non-stop, pestering me with questions about Henry's and his mother's daily routines. How do you make Mr. Fu's congee? Which doctor did you see for your health issues? I'd explained everything to him countless times, my patience wearing thin. Uncle Wang, I've already written everything down in a document for you. Even regular employees don't have to keep working for their old company after they quit, do they? The butler would apologize profusely over the phone, but then he'd call again the next day with more questions. He even started asking me about trivial matters related to the Fu Group's business operations. Mom would grumble while peeling vegetables in the kitchen, overhearing my end of the conversations. You're busier than the president of a country. Did you marry him to be his wife or his personal assistant? I felt a twinge of embarrassment. I'd stopped answering the butler's calls eventually. But some of the business partners were trickier to deal with. I couldn't exactly tell them I was no longer associated with Henry Fu, not when we were still in the middle of our divorce and there were tens of millions of yuan worth of projects on the line. These are multi-million yuan deals we're talking about, I sighed. I'd known many of the Fu Group's employees for years, and I'd been the one maintaining relationships with the partners and their wives, organizing events and keeping track of everyone's preferences on a detailed spreadsheet. Even now, with the divorce pending, I was still stuck dealing with all these messy leftover tasks. Mom slammed my laptop shut with a sharp bang, her eyes blazing with anger. Your top priority right now is to eat well and take care of your health. Even if it was an early miscarriage, it still took a toll on your body. You need to rest. And what do you get out of doing all these things for him? Do you think that man will ever appreciate your efforts? Let me tell you something, kiddo, the only person who will always have your back is yourself. I sent all the documents the butler had been asking for to his email one last time, then blocked his number and the numbers of all the other Fu Group employees who'd been pestering me. Mom confiscated my laptop afterward, hiding it away in a closet where I couldn't reach it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the world went quiet. It was then that I realized, with a jolt of clarity, that my entire life had revolved around Henry Fu for far too long. Mom hummed triumphantly, putting her hands on her hips. You were never this busy when you were studying for your exams. And look how well you did, got into a top-tier university, passed the bar exam with flying colors. Let them struggle without you for a change. They'll soon realize what a huge mistake they made letting you go. I rolled my eyes playfully, a small smile tugging at my lips. Mom, he's a CEO of a multi-billion yuan company, remember? Mom waved a hand dismissively, her voice full of conviction. I don't care how rich he is. Without my daughter, he's nothing. My girl is the smartest, the strongest, the best there is. Just like when I was a kid. Mom had always told me I was the best, that I could do anything I set my mind to. And that unwavering belief had carried me through all the way to a top university, all the way to becoming a successful lawyer, all the way to where I was now. But I'd never told her how exhausting it had been to be Mrs. Henry Fu. How lonely and suffocating it had felt to live in that gilded cage. I suppose that was what all kids did when they left home. We shared our joys, but we kept our pain and struggles to ourselves. But when we're hurt and broken, there's no place we want to be more than home, wrapped in our mother's arms. After Piper Wan left, Henry Fu's initial rage had slowly simmered down to a cold, hollow calm. He'd always told himself that Eleanor Gu was the love of his life, the one who'd captured his heart when they were young. But now that she was back, he felt none of the old flutters, none of the infatuation he'd once cherished. Instead, everywhere he turned, people kept reminding him of Piper's presence, of the indelible mark she'd left on his life, his business, his world. Henry's business partners all frowned when they didn't see her by his side at meetings. Where's your wife? That lawsuit she handled for us last time was brilliant, absolute perfection. Why isn't she here today? My wife has been dying to thank her in person. And those little cookies she bakes? My daughter is obsessed with them. Henry felt a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. She's gone back to her hometown for a while. His partner's eyes lit up with relief. Ah, I see. Good thing you two aren't divorced yet. A strange, unsettling thought nagged at Henry. Were these partners collaborating with him because of his company's technical strength? Or were they doing it for Piper? He couldn't hold back the question any longer. Why do you care so much about my wife? His partner looked genuinely surprised by the question. Your wife has put in so much work for these collaborations. She even noticed my wife was struggling with depression and started accompanying her on shopping trips. They're practically best friends now. I've been demoted to second place in my own wife's heart thanks to her. Besides, with her around, every partnership runs like clockwork. Let's be honest, we'd work with anyone who makes things this easy for us. The partner grinned, dismissing the matter with a wave of his hand. But Henry's heart sank. Like a stone, an unpleasant taste lingering in his mouth. It wasn't just his business partners who missed Piper. Even his notoriously strict mother was furious with him. Have you lost your mind? She'd snapped, her voice trembling with anger. Everyone can see how much Piper has sacrificed for you over the years. Why on earth would you get tangled up with that Eleanor Gu again? You make me so angry I could scream. If you don't get Piper back, don't bother coming home. She'd somehow found out about Piper's miscarriage and the news had sent her blood pressure skyrocketing. She'd been this close to collapsing and being rushed to the hospital. She'd pointed a trembling finger at Henry, sputtering, "You," for a full 5 minutes without calming down. Henry returned to the villa that night, and the emptiness felt more suffocating than ever. Once upon a time, no matter how late he worked, Piper would always be waiting up for him, a warm meal on the table, a gentle smile on her face. She truly wanted to be a good wife to him, but he'd been a terrible husband to her. Henry's embarrassment deepened into a profound sense of shame when he finally tracked down Piper's hometown, a tiny village tucked away in the remote northeast. He'd never imagined that the elegant, sophisticated Piper Yuan, who'd always looked so at home in the glittering world of high society, had come from a place like this. She turned her back on unlimited wealth, on the title of Mrs. Fu, just to return to this humble village? A surge of frustration welled up inside Henry, hot and bitter, with no way to escape. His assistant had booked him a flight for the next day. For the first time in his life he was about to set foot in a place like this, a place so far removed from his own reality. When Eleanor Gu noticed how distracted Henry had become, it didn't take her long to find out that Piper Yuan had left him. A triumphant smile tugged at her lips. Finally, she was going to get what she'd always wanted. She was going to become the legitimate Mrs. Fu. She hurried over to Henry's villa, determined to stop him from leaving. She'd heard he was flying out tomorrow and she wasn't about to let him go. "Do you really love her now?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. "You promised me you'd go to the concert with me tomorrow. How could you stand me up like this?" Henry's voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. "Eleanor Gu, we're not kids anymore. Let's not talk about love. It's a luxury we can't afford. I've given you everything you asked for." And that was all he was willing to give her. Nothing more. The youthful infatuation, the indulgence he'd showered on her after her return, all of it had run its course. During the first week after Eleanor came back to Beijing, she'd gotten drunk at a bar and demanded he come pick her up. She'd insisted he accompany her to every fancy party and gala. She'd even woken him up in the middle of the night, screaming in terror from nightmares. Time and time again she'd whispered, "Henry Fu, I can't live without you." At first, those words had softened his heart, made him feel like her savior. But after the third time, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, he'd grown tired. Exhausted. "We never should have reconnected in the first place. This is all my fault." In Henry's eyes, Eleanor was no longer the untouchable, glowing moonbeam of his youth. She was just a pitiful, clinging woman who needed to be rescued. The Gu family's overseas investments had crashed and burned. Despite their glamorous facade, their company was hemorrhaging cash, on the brink of collapse. Yet even now, Eleanor spent her days chasing after concerts and high-end parties, oblivious to her family's dire straits. Her parents could no longer fund her lavish lifestyle and were scrambling to arrange a marriage for her, a marriage that would save their company. She had no skills, no talent to turn the Gu Group's fortunes around. The men who were wealthy enough to help were either ugly or married, and the single handsome ones were never rich enough for her. After weighing all her options, she'd decided no one was better than Henry Fu. The one who got away always held a special place in your heart, didn't he? That was why he'd gone to the airport to pick her up when she returned. He'd wanted to see her regret. He'd wanted to see her beg for his help, to watch her squirm as she realized how much she'd lost by leaving him all those years ago. Henry let out a long, weary sigh. It wasn't until Piper left that he realized how much he'd relied on her. Without her by his side, work felt like a crushing burden. He'd even left the house this morning with his tie askew, something he'd never done before. Henry had wanted to see Eleanor Gu regret her choices. But he'd never expected that he would be the one drowning in regret. Eleanor dug her nails into her palm until they drew blood, pressing her body tightly against Henry's back. "I can do everything Piper did for you, Henry. Just give me one more chance. Please, I'm begging you." But Henry knew the truth. She couldn't. Not everyone was like Piper Wan. Piper had poured her heart and soul into everything she did for him, never once complaining, never once shedding a tear for sympathy. She'd just done it. Henry closed his eyes, his resolve hardening. He hadn't wanted to hurt Eleanor, hadn't wanted to tear their fragile truce apart. But she'd left him no choice. He stepped away from her, pulling out his phone and handing it to her. On the screen was the provocative photo she'd sent to Piper, the one where she draped herself in a towel, deliberately flaunting her figure behind him. Eleanor's face paled. I didn't." Henry's voice was sharp with anger, cutting her off mid-excuse. He'd never slept with Eleanor. Not once. Every time she'd tried to seduce him, every time she'd thrown herself at him, he'd thought of Piper. And yet Eleanor had sent that shameless photo to Piper anyway, trying to provoke her to ruin their marriage. Henry had tried to text Piper to explain, to apologize, but he'd found himself blocked. He'd tried calling her from countless different phone numbers, but she'd never picked up. In that moment he realized just how badly he'd messed up. It was his constant indulgence of Eleanor, his refusal to set boundaries, that had destroyed his marriage. "Eleanor," Henry said, his voice cold and final, "it's over between us. Don't contact me again. If you need help with anything in the future, call my assistant. As for the Goo Group, it's a bottomless pit. You know I can't save it. I have a responsibility to the Fu Group's shareholders. It's time you grew up. Your family needs you now. Stop groveling at my feet and start doing something useful with your life." Eleanor clung desperately to Henry's sleeve, her eyes filling with tears of rage and humiliation. She couldn't believe this was happening. Just a few weeks ago Henry had been wrapped around her little finger, hanging on her every word. "No, please don't do this. You can't treat me like this." But Henry didn't look back. He walked out of the villa and headed straight for the airport. He was too late to apologize, too late to make amends, but he had to try. He couldn't live without Piper Wan. Eleanor collapsed to the floor, sobbing hysterically. Why, hadn't he loved her the most? It was Henry Fu's first time stepping foot on this land. The bitter, icy wind sliced through his expensive suit, making him shiver uncontrollably. He curled his hands into tight fists, his teeth chattering slightly. His assistant had arranged for a car, and they'd driven for hours before finally reaching Piper's village. Henry was used to the glitz and glamour of big cities, and this place felt alien, foreign, like another world entirely. He realized, with a jolt of clarity, that he'd never really known Piper Wan at all. How could someone so tough, so strong, so full of life have grown up in a place like this? The streets were bustling with people, all bundled up in thick, warm coats to fend off the cold. Henry, dressed in his tailored suit, felt completely out of place. And then he saw her. Piper was standing by a street stall, laughing, a tall, handsome young man by her side, carrying her bags for her, his eyes soft with adoration as he looked at her. An old lady standing next to Henry clucked her tongue, shaking her head sympathetically. "Oh, you're here for the Wan girl too, huh? Poor thing, heard she lost her husband overseas. Her mom's been trying to set her up with nice boys lately, bless her heart." Lost her husband? Henry stared at the old lady, his voice coming out as a hoarse whisper. She lost her husband. The old lady nodded vigorously, patting his arm in sympathy. As dead as a doornail, so they say. A sharp, throbbing pain pulsed at Henry's temples. She'd had a miscarriage. She'd left him. And now she was here in this freezing, godforsaken village laughing with another man? And she told everyone he was dead? A wave of crushing defeat washed over Henry, unlike anything he'd ever felt before. Piper Juan was erasing him from her life, completely and utterly. Piper was still laughing, her head tilted back, her voice bright and clear, like a silver bell ringing in the crisp winter air. It was a sound Henry hadn't heard in far too long, a sound full of life, full of joy. A sound she'd never made when she was with him. Henry's throat tightened, his voice coming out low and rough, barely audible above the buzz of the crowd. Piper Juan. I stared at Henry Fu in disbelief. His tailored suit looked so out of place in this small northern town. How on earth had he tracked me down here? I just stepped out to buy soy sauce for Mom when I ran into Asher Bai, the neighbor's son who'd just returned from out of town. We hadn't seen each other in years and there was no shortage of things to catch up on. I certainly hadn't expected to turn around and find Henry standing there. I met his turbulent gaze with complete confusion. Is there a problem with the divorce agreement? Henry's voice was low and hoarse. No. I nodded nonchalantly. Then are you here for a vacation? Enjoy your trip, I've got things to do. Henry's jaw tightened with suppressed anger. He reached out to grab my wrist but I dodged nimbly and Asher stepped in front of me protectively. Can't you see Piper doesn't want to talk to you? Henry's eyes blazed with fury. You can be mad at me all you want. But we're still married, how dare you flaunt this? This nobody in front of me just to get back at me. Asher pointed at himself, then at Henry, laughing in exasperation. Piper? Who exactly is the nobody here? Where was he when we were growing up together as childhood sweethearts? A faint headache throbbed behind my temples, but I didn't stop Asher from running his mouth. If it would drive Henry away and put an end to his pestering, so be it. Asher slipped an arm around my shoulders, his voice loud enough for Henry to hear clearly. I may be younger than him and maybe I don't have his money right now, but my dad's a coal tycoon. And unlike him, my one and only white moonlight has always been Piper. I fought the urge to roll my eyes, pinching Asher gently at the waist. Dude, you're laying it on a little thick. Asher was a wealthy second generation too, but nothing like the pretentious elites Henry ran with. He had a down-to-earth vibe about him and a thick gold chain glinted around his neck. Big deal if he's got a few bucks. Who doesn't these days? Henry followed me all the way home, insisting he had nowhere else to go. He was being more stubborn and clingy than a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. Asher tagged along too, and the two men exchanged silent, hostile glances, the air between them crackling with tension. Henry Fu, we're getting a divorce, I said flatly. Henry refused to back down. Not yet, we're not. I rubbed my throbbing temples, my patience wearing thin. We're in the divorce cooling off period, it's only a matter of time. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll settle this in court. And you know full well I don't lose cases. Asher let out a cold snort beside me. Cheating on her behind her back and still expecting her to stay home and be your obedient little wife? You've got to be kidding me. He clapped a hand over his mouth suddenly, his eyes widening. Piper. I didn't mean you're an obedient little wife. You're amazing. Even more amazing now that you're dumping him. Henry's brows furrowed deeply and he stepped forward, eager to explain himself. I didn't cheat. Piper Juan, there's a misunderstanding between us, please just listen to me. We'd reached the entrance of my apartment building by now and Henry followed hot on my heels. I sighed, my voice heavy with resignation. I know everything, Henry. There's nothing left for you to explain. Go back to Beijing. The only thing we have left to do is sign the divorce papers. After that, we'll have nothing more to do with each other. My tone was so calm, so devoid of any emotion, that Henry's mouth opened and closed a few times, as if he wanted to say something else but couldn't find the words. The commotion at the door was loud enough to draw Mom's attention. She stormed out, a broom in her hand, and whacked Henry hard on the back with it. Look at you, you spineless weasel. Have you got no shame? Can't you just leave my daughter alone? The great CEO had just been attacked with a broom and now he was putting on a pitiful, dejected look. Still, he was a guest who'd traveled all this way and Mom couldn't very well leave him standing outside in the cold forever. Reluctantly, she let him into the house and gestured for him to sit. Mom didn't even bother to pour him a glass of water. She cut straight to the chase, her voice sharp and unforgiving. Explain yourself then. What's your big excuse? I saw that photo that little hussy sent. You cheated on my daughter while you were still married. How dare you? Mom's words were righteous and scathing, and Henry's face turned bright red with embarrassment. We didn't sleep together. It was a good thing Mom hadn't poured him that glass of water. She would have thrown it in his face without a second thought. You shameless bastard. Henry opened his mouth to defend himself, but I cut him off with a tired sigh. I know the truth, Mom. I didn't just listen to Eleanor's lies and jump to conclusions. I work in the legal field. I deal in facts and evidence, not rumors. I'm not making a scene over nothing. There's no big, unsolvable conflict between us. I just want a divorce. Isn't that allowed? Henry had suddenly turned into a piece of gum stuck to the bottom of a shoe. He refused to leave no matter what anyone said. Mom shot me a stern look, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. Don't you dare forgive him just because he's groveling. Feeling sorry for a man will only lead to a lifetime of pain and regret. I nodded vigorously, agreeing with her completely. With nothing better to do and not wanting to sit around like a useless guest, Henry offered to help Mom with the housework. But Mom wasn't about to make it easy for him. All talk and no action. I can tell you've never lifted a finger at home in your life. Raised with a silver spoon in his mouth, Henry didn't even know how to sweep the floor properly. Don't think I don't know all the grievances my daughter endured when she married you. How many people talked behind her back, looked down on her for being a Cinderella, marrying into your fancy family. You can't even stand being here for a few days? Imagine how she felt all those years. Mom was never one to mince words, and she ordered the great Zio around like he was a lowly errand boy, showing him no mercy. My daughter is smart, capable, and straightforward. She helped you build your empire from the ground up, did everything for you. What did you ever do for her? Nothing. You're completely useless. Henry was so embarrassed his neck and ears turned bright red. He scurried around the house like a bumbling recruit, trying his best to keep up with Mom's demands. I shook my head at Mom, unable to hide my amusement. Cut him some slack, Mom. We're getting a divorce anyway. What's the point of torturing him like this? Mom huffed, glaring at Henry with undisguised irritation. I just can't swallow this anger. Why should my precious daughter, who I raised with so much love and care, suffer so much for a man like you? Henry's face burned with shame. He looked at me earnestly, his voice thick with emotion. I swear to you I will never let Piper Juan suffer another moment of grievance ever again. I'll make it up to her, I promise. Mom nearly jumped out of her chair in outrage. Now you're sorry? Now you're promising to make it right? Where were you when she lost your child? Save your empty promises, they're not worth a dime. You two were doing just fine, living a good life. Then you had to go and mess everything up with your nonsense. It just proves you two were never meant to be together. If you were, you wouldn't have ended up in this mess. Mom's words came at Henry like a machine gun, leaving him no room to defend himself, no chance to get a word in edgewise. Mom's attitude toward Asher, however, was like night and day. She didn't make him lift a finger, he just sat on the sofa and Mom beamed at him like he was her own son. Now this is a proper Northeastern boy. So much better than that city slicker. Piper, you really do have terrible taste in men. I couldn't help but facepalm. I was truly at a loss for words. Henry seemed determined to prove he could be a responsible, down-to-earth man who knew how to take care of a family. But even if he got down on his knees and begged for forgiveness, Mom wouldn't have cared. She thought his groveling was utterly worthless. He'd been staying at our house for a week now, enduring Mom's scoldings and lectures every single day. The Fu group was falling apart without him, piling up with urgent matters that needed his attention. Henry's mother had even called me, speaking in a soft, conciliatory tone, trying to persuade me to come back to Beijing. When that didn't work, she'd begged me to talk some sense into Henry instead. I was tired of this endless back and forth, tired of being stuck in this endless loop of arguments and explanations. I decided it was time to have a serious talk with Henry once and for all. Henry thought he'd humbled himself beyond recognition, that he'd given me the biggest, most sincere apology a man could offer. His pride had been trampled into the dirt and he thought that should be enough to win me back. Piper Juan. I never did any of this for Eleanor. Not once. Can't you just give me one more chance? But I still refused to budge, my resolve unshakable. Is this divorce really that non-negotiable? Tell me what you don't like about me and I'll change it. I'll do anything. I'd loved Henry Fu with all my heart once, loved him fiercely and passionately. I didn't regret that love for a single second. Even now, even with this painful ending, I didn't regret ever loving him. Henry Fu, I said quietly, my voice steady and calm, I know everything. Every single thing. I know exactly when you left to meet Eleanor, when you stayed out all night to comfort her, when you dropped everything just to take care of her problems. I didn't want to see you with her, didn't want to face the truth, so I pretended I didn't know. But your lies were so clumsy, so transparent. You said you had to work late at the office. But you were really with her, weren't you? I'd lost count of how many times he'd lied to me like that. Emotional infidelity, was it really any different from physical infidelity? I lifted the glass in my hand and slammed it down hard on the floor. It shattered into 1,000 pieces, the sound echoing sharply through the quiet room. I've been disappointed too many times, Henry. No matter how hard I tried to hold on to us, you always chose her in the end. This glass, even if I glued every single shard back together, the cracks would still be there. They'd never disappear. Henry's eyes were filled with desperation. I know I was wrong. I've cut ties with Eleanor completely. If you never want to see her again, I'll send her overseas, far away from us, where she can never bother us again. I shook my head slowly, my gaze filled with sorrow but no anger. Eleanor didn't really do anything wrong, not really, except for provoking me, of course. She's already been branded as a homewrecker, already gotten the punishment she deserves for her actions. The one who was truly wrong was you, Henry. It was your wishy-washy attitude, your inability to set boundaries. It was your heart that always tilted toward her no matter what. You were the one who stabbed me in the heart. You were the one who broke us. I suppose that was the way it was with all arrogant CEOs like him. They never thought they were the ones at fault. I frowned, looking at him squarely, determined to make him face the truth once and for all. That day I went to the hospital. I was sick and our baby was in danger. And where were you? You were on your way to comfort Eleanor, who was drowning her sorrows in a bar. I remember thinking to myself in that moment, this baby's own father doesn't even want him to be born. I stared straight into Henry's eyes, my voice cold and distant, devoid of any lingering affection. Henry Fu, don't you think it's a little too late to say you love me now? Isn't it possible that you don't really love me at all? You're just not used to me being gone. I was like a business partner you'd worked with for years, reliable, efficient, always there when you needed me. But I've already handed over all my work and soon enough, someone else will take my place. You'll forget about me soon enough. Snow began to fall outside the window, swirling gently through the air, blurring Henry's features until he looked like a distant, indistinct figure. He let out a roar of frustration, his voice cracking with pain. No, that's not true. That's not it at all. I let out a long, weary sigh. After all these years, if you still haven't fallen in love with me, then you never will. You were never meant to. Henry Fu, let's just let each other go, okay? Once this snow stops falling, we'll go sign those divorce papers, and then we'll go our separate ways. For good. Here in this small town, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of home, eating Mom's cooking, I felt a surge of courage I hadn't felt in years. My heart, which had felt empty and hollow for so long, was slowly filling up again, like a balloon being inflated with newfound strength and resolve. For years, I'd worried constantly about whether I was good enough for him, whether he really loved me. I'd put his needs, his feelings, his happiness above my own for far too long. He didn't love me, that was his loss, not mine. He'd made his choice and now I was making mine. Henry Fu was consumed by agony. Each day of the divorce countdown with Piper Ruan felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest, draining him of life bit by bit. The infatuation of his youth had been nothing but an illusion. It took years of shared struggles to make him realize where his true heart lay. He refused to believe Piper was right. He had fallen in love with her. He loved her resilience, her unyielding strength. The moment she'd reached out to him from the depths of his despair, he'd already begun to love her. He just hadn't known it then. He'd never wanted to let her go. But Piper's mother, instead of continuing to berate him, had sat him down for a serious talk, one that would shatter his world completely. She'd listed, one by one, all the sacrifices Piper had made for him over the years, her voice trembling with suppressed anger and heartache. When my daughter married you, she weighed 100, Jean. Now, she's down to 80. She's loved meat ever since she was a kid, but now? She can barely eat 2 bites without feeling sick. Once upon a time she could sleep like a log even before her college entrance exams. Now, she suffers from insomnia every night. Even sleeping pills don't work anymore. You married her and your company rose from the ashes like a phoenix. But what did she get out of it? All I know is that my happy, carefree little girl is gone forever. Each accusation landed like a heavy blow to his chest, pressing down on him until he could barely breathe. She could have made a huge success of her own career if she'd wanted to. How much did she give up just to help you? She's always hated those tight, suffocating dresses she had to wear to your fancy parties. Back then he'd naively thought Piper had done everything willingly, that she'd gotten her fair share of wealth in return. He'd even foolishly believed that being Mrs. Fu was the best thing that could have ever happened to her, that she'd transcended her social class, climbed to a position no one else could reach. He'd been so blind, so stupid, that he hadn't seen the pain hidden beneath her smiles. Piper's mother hadn't been trying to torment him. She'd only been speaking out of a mother's love for her daughter. With immense pride she'd shown him Piper's stack of awards and certificates, proof of all her achievements before she'd walked into his life. My daughter. She's always gotten everything she's ever set her mind to. She's achieved so much in her life, everything except you. She's always been so stubborn, so unwilling to admit defeat. She crashed and burned and came out of it covered in scars. You've always had someone else you thought you loved, haven't you? Then let Piper go. She's already hurt enough. How could you bear to keep her tied to this marriage? She'd cry if she scraped her knee as a child and it would break my heart. Look what you've done to her now. Just let her go. Listening to this mother's heartfelt words, Henry Fu finally, truly understood. Piper had never wanted his money, his status, or his power. All she'd ever wanted was his heart. And because of his own childish foolishness, his own blindness, he'd lost her forever. Henry and I went to the Civil Affairs Bureau together to finalize the divorce. When we stepped out, Mom was already waiting for me at the door. She opened her arms wide and pulled me into a tight hug, just like she'd done so many times during the pivotal moments of my life. She'd hugged me like this after my college entrance exams, waiting for me outside the exam hall with tears of joy in her eyes. She'd hugged me like this at my graduation ceremony, beaming with pride as I'd walked across the stage to receive my diploma. Her strong, warm arms wrapped around me, filling me with an infinite courage to face whatever the future held. Best day of your life, kiddo. Asherby stood beside Mom, holding a bouquet of bright, cheerful flowers. Piper, congratulations on your new beginning. I smiled, a real, genuine smile, the first one I'd worn in a long time. If this whole messy situation had been a farce, then Henry was definitely the one who'd gotten the worst of it. But there was no turning back now. Goodbye, Henry Fu, I said quietly. Henry's voice was hoarse, his words filled with a helplessness that tugged at my heartstrings, though not enough to make me stay. Piper Ruan. Life is still so long. Will I ever get another chance to pursue you? I gave him a polite, distant smile. I remember you once said you hated wasting time on things that didn't bring you any benefits. Chasing after me would be exactly that, a waste of his time. After the divorce, I stayed with Mom in our small northeastern town for 3 months. For those 3 months, I cut myself off completely from the chaos and noise of the outside world. I still thought of Henry from time to time, of course. Years of marriage had taken their toll on me, leaving me feeling empty and exhausted, like a shell of my former self. But Mom's loud, bustling presence always pulled me back to reality, back to the comfort of home, where there was always a warm meal waiting for me on the table, no matter how late I stayed up. By the end of those 3 months, I'd fully regained my strength, my spark, my sense of self. The pain of the marriage had faded into a distant memory. When an old friend of mine invited me to start a law firm with her, I jumped at the chance without hesitation. That night, after dinner with Mom, I wrapped my arms around her tightly. Mom, I'm going back to Beijing, I told her. Her embrace was warm and comforting as always. Once the heart's healed, it's time to spread your wings again. This small town is too tiny to keep someone as bright as you caged. But your old mom's gotten used to having you around, that's for sure. A sharp ache tugged at my heart and tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them back, not wanting to make her sad. Mom patted my back gently, her touch soothing away the last traces of fear and uncertainty lingering in my heart. No matter what you choose, I'll support you. Mom will always be your rock, your safest harbor. But don't let this bad experience make you cynical about life or love, okay? Be brave enough to try again. Even if you get hurt, I'll always be here waiting for you to come home. In this life, as long as Mom is here, there will never be any real suffering. I set off again, ready to take on the world. My friend and I founded our law firm, and to my surprise, my old clients were quick to congratulate me on this new chapter of my career. Even Henry's business partners and their wives sent flowers to celebrate our grand opening. My friend laughed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. This is incredible. What other law firm gets a red carpet welcome from half the wealthy elite before it even opens its doors? For the first time in a long time, I felt a surge of pride in myself. All those years of hard work, all those years of being kind and honest to everyone around me, they hadn't gone unnoticed. My career flourished, growing more successful with each passing day. I was genuinely shocked when I heard the news of Eleanor Gu's marriage. She'd married a wealthy businessman in his late 40s, a man whose first wife had passed away, and whose children were barely younger than Eleanor herself. That was when I finally learned the truth about the Gu family's dire financial situation. Eleanor had returned to Beijing determined to cling to Henry Fu like a lifeline, only to have her plans fall apart spectacularly. With no other options left, she'd had no choice but to obey her family's wishes and marry the wealthy tycoon. The next time I saw her was at a business banquet. There was a deep, tired weariness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She approached me, hesitating for a moment before speaking, her voice soft with regret. "I'm sorry, Piper." I shook my head, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "You were just the catalyst for our divorce. The real reason I left had nothing to do with you, it was Henry's choice, through and through. Henry never loved me. That's not your fault. And if you ever need any help," I added, handing her my business card, "don't hesitate to call." I'd heard rumors that the tycoon had many children, and that his late wife's kids were already powerful enough to challenge Eleanor's position in the family. Even now that she was pregnant, it would be an uphill battle for her to secure her place. Eleanor smiled, a faint, genuine smile, the first one I'd ever seen on her face. "You're so rational. No wonder you didn't want Henry anymore. He was so childish back then. I didn't want to dwell on a man who was now firmly in my past, and I certainly didn't want to badmouth him." I waved a hand dismissively, cutting the conversation short. "We can talk business if you want. But let's leave the rest in the past, shall we? Henry had been childish back then, yes. And I'd been stubborn, clinging to a love that had never really existed. In the end, there was no right or wrong, no villain or victim. He'd never loved me, and I'd grown tired of waiting for a love that would never come. So we'd gotten a divorce. I'd lost more than he had, of course. I'd lost our child. There had been a time when I'd been torn about whether to keep the baby or not. But I hadn't wanted my child to be a chain that bound me to Henry, to a marriage that had already died. I hadn't wanted them to grow up hearing the story of how their parents had fallen out of love, how their father had never wanted them. For some reason, Henry's company's performance had been declining year after year. He was still the CEO, but the spark of ambition and drive that had once defined him was gone. The next time I saw him, there were heavy bags under his eyes, and the whites of his eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. "Piper Ruan," he said, his voice cracking with emotion, "I haven't been able to live a single day happily since you left." Was he really this upset about losing a free laborer? I thought about it for a moment, then answered him honestly, my voice calm and clear. "But I've never been happier than I was the day I left you." It was a rejection, plain and simple. I was rejecting him again. Henry fell silent, his shoulders slumping in defeat. To his credit, he didn't try to pester me further in public. But he never gave up on the idea of winning me back. He sent me flowers every single day. When I refused to accept them, he had them delivered to the law firm's front door instead, until even the receptionist was teasing me about it. "Our office is practically drowning in flowers, Ms. Ruan." I didn't want the flowers. I didn't want to be Mrs. Henry Fu ever again. That job had been exhausting, and no one had ever appreciated how hard I'd worked at it. It was far better to pour all my energy into my own career, to watch it thrive and flourish, to be recognized for my own talents and hard work. I was long past the age where receiving flowers from Henry Fu would make my heart flutter. What I wanted now was a successful career and a sincere, equal relationship, One where I wouldn't have to struggle or sacrifice. One where I could just be myself. Asherby pulled up to the law firm in his flashy sports car, rolling down the window and grinning at me. He popped open the passenger door, gesturing for me to get in. Enough with the boring stuff. Come on, Piper. Let's go have some fun. No stuffy boardrooms, no fake smiles, just us. I'll treat you like a queen. You can call all the shots, no questions asked.